Commander Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the massive alien fleet position itself beyond Earth's moon. The Kaltharan Dominion had arrived 3 days ago with enough firepower to glass a dozen worlds. Their sleek, crystalline ships hung in space like deadly jewels, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the Kaltharan flagship," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. Sarah turned away from the viewport, her weathered face showing no emotion. At 52, she had seen humanity's first steps into the galaxy, witnessed the brutal reality of interstellar politics, and learned that in this universe, strength was the only language everyone understood. "Put them through," she ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a towering figure in ornate armor. High Admiral Vexnar of the Kaltharan Dominion stood over 8 feet tall, his forearms crossed in a gesture of contempt. His species had evolved from apex predators, and it showed in every line of his massive frame. Human, Vexnar's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Your species has violated the Neutral Zone Treaty by establishing colonies in the Kepler sector. The Dominion Council has decreed that humanity must withdraw immediately and surrender all territorial claims beyond your home system." Sarah remained perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back. Around the command center, her staff continued their work with practiced efficiency. They had been preparing for this moment for months. "And if we refuse?" Sarah asked calmly. Vexnar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Then we will demonstrate why the Kaltharan Dominion has remained unchallenged for 3,000 years. My fleet carries enough firepower to reduce your homeworld to molten slag. Your primitive vessels pose no threat to our superior technology." Behind the alien commander, Sarah could see other figures moving about their bridge. The Kaltharans were an ancient military civilization, their entire culture built around conquest and dominance. They had crushed 17 species in the past millennium, adding their territories to the ever-expanding Dominion. "You have 6 hours to begin your withdrawal," Vexnar continued. "After that, we will begin systematic destruction of your orbital installations, followed by your colonies, and finally your homeworld itself. This is the mercy we show to primitive species who know their place." Sarah nodded once. "I understand your position, Admiral. However, I'm afraid we can't comply with your demands." The alien's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Then you choose extinction." "No," Sarah replied, a slight smile touching her lips. "We choose to defend ourselves." "And Admiral, when you deploy your strongest soldiers for the ground assault, you might want to bring extra stretchers." Vexnar's roar of fury echoed through the communication channel before the transmission cut out abruptly. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his station, concern evident in his young features. "Ma'am, our intelligence reports show they have over 2 million elite shock troopers aboard those ships. Their individual soldiers are stronger, faster, and better armed than anything we've fielded before." Sarah walked over to another viewport, this one showing Earth in all its blue and green glory. Somewhere down there, in hidden facilities scattered across 6 continents, humanity's real response was already in motion. "Torres, what do you know about human history?" she asked. The lieutenant looked confused by the apparent change of subject. "Ma'am? Specifically, what do you know about how we've dealt with technologically superior enemies in the past?" Torres thought for a moment. "Well, there's the American Revolutionary War, where colonial militias defeated the British Empire. Or World War II, where less advanced nations eventually overcame better-equipped forces through strategy and determination." "Good examples," Sarah nodded. "But those weren't really about technology gaps. They were about underestimating human nature." She turned back to face her staff. "The Kaltharans see us as a primitive species because our ships are smaller, our weapons less advanced, our population smaller than theirs. They're making the same mistake that powerful civilizations have made throughout history." "What mistake is that, ma'am?" asked Dr. Williams, the station's chief science officer. Sarah's smile widened. "They're assuming that technological superiority equals military victory. They don't understand that humans don't fight like other species. We don't fight to win territory or resources or even survival. When we're truly threatened, we fight to ensure our enemy never threatens anyone again." The command center fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. "Ma'am," Torres ventured, "are you talking about the Prometheus project?" Sarah's expression became unreadable. The Prometheus project had been humanity's most classified military program, so secret that most government officials didn't even know it existed. For 20 years, the best minds of the species had worked on a single question. How do you defeat an enemy that is individually superior to you in every measurable way? The answer, as it turned out, was typically human in its audacity. "Signal all fleet commanders," Sarah ordered. "Operation Endgame is now active. All civilian populations are to be evacuated to designated safe zones immediately. Military personnel are to report to their assigned stations." As her staff rushed to comply, Sarah returned to the viewport. The Caltharan fleet was already moving into attack formation, their weapons beginning to charge for the coming assault. They had no idea what they were about to face. In 67 hours, High Admiral Vexnar would request an emergency ceasefire. In 96 hours, the Caltharan Dominion Council would offer unconditional surrender. In 112 hours, 3,000 years of Caltharan military dominance would be over forever. But right now, all they could see was a small human woman standing alone against the might of an interstellar empire, and they thought they knew how this story would end. They were wrong. The first Caltharan assault came exactly 6 hours after the ultimatum expired. High Admiral Vexnar watched from his command throne as his fleet's devastating weapons reduced Luna Station's outer defenses to glowing debris in a matter of minutes. The human orbital platforms offered token resistance before being overwhelmed by superior firepower. "Pathetic," muttered Subcommander Krell, Vexnar's tactical officer. "Their defensive grid collapsed faster than a Xerian mining colony. These humans are even weaker than our intelligence suggested." Vexnar's 4 eyes remained fixed on the tactical display. Something felt wrong. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming warnings he couldn't quite identify. "Status report on the human fleet?" he demanded. "Scattered and retreating, my lord," reported another officer. 17 vessels destroyed, 32 damaged and fleeing toward their homeworld. No significant resistance encountered. The display showed human ships breaking formation and racing back toward Earth in apparent panic. It was exactly what Vexnar had expected from an inferior species facing overwhelming force. Yet something about their retreat pattern bothered him. "Sir," came a new voice from the sensor station, "we're detecting multiple energy signatures from the planet's surface. Large installations powering up across all 6 inhabited continents." Vexnar leaned forward. "Military installations?" "Unknown, my lord. The energy patterns don't match any known weapon signatures in our database. They appear to be industrial in nature." Before Vexnar could respond, his communications officer announced an incoming transmission from the planet below. The human female from before appeared on screen, still standing in what appeared to be an intact command center despite the orbital bombardment. "Admiral," Commander Chen said pleasantly, "I hope you're satisfied with your opening demonstration. Our military leadership is quite impressed with your firepower." Vexnar's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Your orbital defenses have been destroyed, human. Your fleet is scattered. Surrender now, and we will consider allowing your species to exist as a client state." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That's a generous offer, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline. You see, what you just destroyed weren't our real defenses. Those were just the obvious targets we put up to give you something to shoot at." "Impossible," Krell interjected. "Our sensors show no significant military installations remaining." "That's because you're looking for the wrong thing," Sarah replied. "You're looking for weapons, defensive platforms, military vessels. But humans learned long ago that the most dangerous military asset isn't a weapon at all." Vexnar felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" Sarah's smile was genuinely warm, which somehow made it more terrifying than any threat. "We're talking about manufacturing capacity, Admiral. For the past 20 years, we've been preparing for exactly this scenario. Not by building better weapons, but by building better factories." The tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts. Across Earth's surface, massive structures were rising from underground installations. But these weren't missile silos or defense platforms. They were production facilities, each one the size of a city. "You see," Sarah continued, "we studied your species very carefully. You're excellent warriors, individually superior to humans in almost every measurable way. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. Your ships are faster, stronger, better armed. In a fair fight, you would win easily." Vexnar watched in growing horror as the production facilities reached full emergence. Scanner readings showed industrial capacity that dwarfed anything in Caltharan space. "The thing is," Sarah said, "humans don't fight fair. We fight to win. And we've learned that the side with the bigger industrial base always wins in the end, no matter how brave or advanced their individual soldiers are." On the tactical display, new contacts began appearing in Earth orbit, not ships returning from retreat, but fresh vessels emerging from concealed construction bays hidden throughout the system. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of craft of a design the Caltharan computers couldn't identify. "Impossible," Vexnar breathed. "No species can maintain that level of hidden production." "Most species can't," Sarah agreed. "But most species don't have our particular talent for mass production. We've had practice, you see. World War II taught us that victory goes to whoever can build the most tanks, planes, and ships the fastest. We've just scaled up the concept a bit." The new human vessels weren't impressive individually. They were smaller than Caltharan ships, less elegant, clearly built for quantity over quality. But there were so many of them. And more were launching every minute. "My lord," his sensor officer reported, voice shaking. "Production readings indicate they're manufacturing approximately 100 vessels per hour across all facilities. At this rate, they'll achieve numerical parity with our fleet in 18 hours. And complete numerical superiority in 36, Sarah added helpfully, apparently monitoring their communications. "But that's not the interesting part." Vexnar's throat felt dry. "What is the interesting part?" "The interesting part is that these aren't just ships," Sarah explained. "They're automated manufacturing platforms. Each one can produce 10 more vessels per day once they reach full deployment. We call it exponential production capacity." The mathematics were terrifying. If the humans could indeed maintain that production rate, they would have overwhelming numerical superiority within a week. Within a month, they could theoretically outproduce the entire Caltharan Dominion. "This is insane," Krell protested. "No civilization devotes that much of their resources to military production." Sarah's expression became serious for the first time. "Admiral, with respect, you clearly don't understand human psychology. When we feel truly threatened, we don't just fight with our military. Every factory, every resource, every citizen becomes part of the war effort. We've done it before." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "In our Second World War, my country alone produced over 300,000 aircraft in 4 years. 300,000 from a single nation with 1940s technology. We outproduced the rest of the world combined." Vexnar stared at the display showing the ever-growing human fleet. "That's impossible. The resource requirements alone would cripple any economy." "Not if you're fighting for survival," Sarah said quietly. "And Admiral, you made this a fight for survival the moment you threatened to glass our homeworld." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just facing a human military. They were facing an entire species that had just shifted into what they apparently called total war mode. "Sir," came a nervous voice from the tactical station, "the human vessels are beginning to form attack formations." The first wave of human vessels approached the Caltharan fleet, in a formation that made no tactical sense to Admiral Vexnar. Instead of maintaining proper spacing and defensive positions, they clustered together in tight groups, presenting massive targets for his superior weapons. "These humans are either completely inexperienced or utterly insane," Subcommander Krell observed. "They're flying directly into our firing solutions." Vexnar studied the approaching formation with growing unease. 3 decades of military command had taught him that when an enemy did something that appeared stupid, it usually meant you were missing something important. "Open fire," he ordered. "Target the lead formations." The Caltharan fleet unleashed a devastating barrage. Energy beams that could slice through battleship armor struck the human vessel's dead center. The results were immediate and catastrophic for the Caltharans. Instead of destroying the human ships, the weapons fire passed harmlessly through them. The vessels flickered like mirages and vanished, revealing them to be sophisticated holographic projections. "What in the void?" Krell stammered. The real human fleet materialized from behind the illusions already within the Caltharan defensive perimeter. But these ships weren't attacking. Instead, they were deploying something, thousands of small objects that scattered across space like seeds in the wind. "Sir," the sensor officer called out in alarm, "those objects are some kind of autonomous units. They're attaching themselves to our hulls." Vexnar watched in horror as the tiny devices swarmed over his ships like parasites. Within minutes, every vessel in his fleet was covered with hundreds of them. Sarah Chen's voice echoed through the communication channel, which had apparently been left open deliberately. "Admiral, I'd like you to meet our real weapons. We call them constructor nanites." Nanites? Vexnar had heard of such technology but dismissed it as impractical for military use. "Think of them as very small engineers," Sarah explained. "Each one is about the size of a grain of sand, but they're quite clever. They can analyze any material they encounter and, well, let me show you." On the nearest Caltharan vessel, sections of armor plating began to shift and change. The nanites were literally rebuilding the ship's hull, transforming weapon systems into harmless communication arrays and converting engine components into life support systems. "Fascinating technology," Sarah continued conversationally. "We developed it for space construction originally, but it turns out to be remarkably useful for rendering enemy vessels non-functional without actually harming the crew. Very humane, really." Vexnar realized with dawning horror that his fleet was being systematically disarmed and disabled without a single shot being fired in return. "Impossible. Our hulls are made of crystalline composite, specifically designed to resist such attacks." "Oh, the nanites love crystalline structures," Sarah replied cheerfully. "Much easier to work with than simple metals. Your ships are being converted into mobile research stations as we speak. The crews will be perfectly safe, just unable to fire weapons or leave the system." But the nanites were only the beginning. As Vexnar watched helplessly, human marines began boarding his disabled vessels. He expected to see the small, fragile creatures his intelligence reports had described. Instead, he found himself staring at something far more disturbing. The humans weren't wearing bulky environmental suits as expected. They moved through space in sleek armor that seemed to flow like liquid around their bodies. Their movements were impossible, too fast, too precise, too coordinated. They cut through Caltharan security forces like they weren't even there. "Sir," came a transmission from one of his ship commanders. "The human boarders are exhibiting impossible combat capabilities. They're predicting our soldiers' movements, coordinating attacks without apparent communication, and demonstrating reflexes that exceed our sensor accuracy." Vexnar switched to internal ship cameras and immediately wished he hadn't. A single human marine was facing down 6 Caltharan warriors in a corridor. The fight lasted exactly 4 seconds. The human moved like flowing water, avoiding attacks that should have been impossible to see coming, striking with surgical precision at exactly the right spots to disable rather than kill. "How?" Vexnar whispered. Sarah's voice answered as if she had heard him. "Enhanced neural interfaces, Admiral. Every human soldier is linked to a quantum computer network that processes sensory data from thousands of sources simultaneously. They don't just see what's in front of them, they see probability matrices, tactical assessments, and predictive models updated in real time. On screen, more human marines were systematically working their way through his ships. They moved with perfect coordination, each one aware of exactly where every other marine was and what they were doing. It was like watching a single organism with thousands of bodies. "But that's not the impressive part," Sarah continued. "The impressive part is that these Marines are volunteers. Every one of them chose to undergo the enhancement process, knowing it would change them forever. That's what happens when humans fight for their families, Admiral. They're willing to become something more than human to protect what they love." Vexnar looked at his tactical display with sick fascination. In less than an hour, his entire fleet had been neutralized. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply rendered completely helpless. And the human Marines were now in control of every vessel. "This is impossible," he said to no one in particular. "No species develops this level of coordination. It goes against every principle of individual survival." "Actually," Sarah said, "humans have been practicing collective action for thousands of years. We call it teamwork. The enhancement process just makes it more efficient." Through his ship's intercom, Vexnar could hear his own crew being gently but firmly escorted to designated areas by human Marines. There was no violence, no threats, just implacable efficiency. "Your people are being confined for their own safety during the conversion process," Sarah explained. "Once your ships are fully converted to our specifications, you'll be free to use them as research vessels or transportation, but they'll be completely incapable of military action." "You're taking our entire fleet?" Vexnar asked. "We're repurposing it," Sarah corrected. Your species clearly has advanced technology and scientific knowledge. We'd much rather have you as research partners than enemies, but we can't allow armed Caltharan vessels to exist anywhere in this galaxy. Vexnar felt something he had never experienced before. Complete, absolute defeat. Not just military defeat, but the crushing realization that his entire understanding of warfare had been proven obsolete in the span of a single engagement. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. Sarah's smile was visible through the communication link. "Admiral, humans have been planning for asymmetric warfare since before we left our home planet. We've never been the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, so we learned to be the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most cooperative." She paused, her expression becoming serious. "And when someone threatens our home, we become the most dangerous." Admiral Vexnar sat in his command chair, now essentially a prisoner aboard his own flagship. The human Marines had been courteous but firm in their control of the vessel. His entire fleet floated helplessly around Earth, converted into what the humans cheerfully called mobile research platforms. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "incoming transmission from Dominion High Command. Priority Alpha." The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Supreme Admiral Thekvar, military commander of the entire Caltharan Dominion. His forearms were crossed in the traditional pose of authority, but Vexnar could see tension in his superior's posture. "Vexnar," Tekvar's voice carried across the light years with crystalline clarity, "explain to me why our tactical computers show your entire fleet as non-responsive and why long-range sensors indicate human vessels throughout your operational area." Vexnar felt the weight of 3,000 years of military tradition crushing down on him. "Supreme Admiral, I regret to report that the human species has capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. My fleet has been neutralized without the loss of a single human life." The silence that followed was deafening. In the background, Vexnar could see other members of the Dominion High Command leaning forward in disbelief. "Neutralized how?" Thekvar asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "They deployed nanite swarms that converted our vessels and enhanced soldiers that overwhelmed our security forces through superior coordination and reflexes. Our weapons were either ineffective or turned against us." Supreme Admiral Thekvar was silent for a long moment. "Are you telling me that a primitive species with no significant military history defeated the pride of the Caltharan fleet?" Before Vexnar could answer, another voice joined the conversation. Commander Sarah Chen stepped into view of the communication pickup, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture that somehow conveyed both respect and complete confidence. "Supreme Admiral," she said politely, "I'm Commander Chen, currently in operational command of this sector. I hope Admiral Vexnar and his crews are being treated well aboard their new research vessels." Tekvar's eyes narrowed as he studied the small human female. "You dare interrupt official Dominion communications?" "Actually, these are human communications now," Sarah replied calmly. "Your fleet is currently under our protection in our sovereign space, but I wanted to address what I imagine is your next decision." The Supreme Admiral's mandibles clicked ominously. "And what decision is that?" "You're considering sending additional forces," Sarah said. "Probably the 2nd and 3rd assault fleets along with specialized units designed to counter what you think you've learned about our capabilities." Thekvar's four eyes widened slightly. The human was absolutely correct. Those had been his exact thoughts. "I wanted to suggest that you reconsider that course of action," Sarah continued. "Not because we're afraid of a larger fleet, but because the result would be the same, just with more of your people affected." "Impossible," Tekvar growled. "You may have achieved a temporary advantage through deception and unknown technology, but the Dominion has resources you cannot imagine." "I can field 50 fleets the size of Vexnar's," Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "You absolutely could, and in a traditional military conflict that would be decisive. But Supreme Admiral, this isn't a traditional military conflict." She gestured and the display split to show real-time footage from across human space. Production facilities that dwarfed anything in Caltharan space were operating at full capacity. Ships rolled off assembly lines faster than the sensors could count them. "This is what humans call total war," Sarah explained. "Every factory, every resource, every citizen working toward a single goal. We've converted our entire civilization into a military-industrial complex, specifically designed to counter your technological advantages." Tekvar stared at the impossible production figures. No species can sustain that level of resource allocation. Most can't, Sarah agreed. But humans have experience with existential threats. When we fought among ourselves, we learned to mobilize entire continents for war. We've just applied those lessons on a galactic scale. She highlighted specific sections of the display. Currently, we're producing approximately 12,000 vessels per day, with production capacity increasing exponentially. Each ship carries nanite swarms, enhanced marines, and adaptive AI systems. By the time your reinforcements arrive, we'll have numerical superiority of roughly 10,000 to 1. The mathematics were staggering. Even if every ship in the Caltharan fleet was individually superior, they couldn't overcome those odds. But numbers aren't the real issue, Sarah continued. The real issue is that humans fight differently than you do. We don't just fight to win territory or resources. When threatened with extinction, we fight to ensure the threat can never return. She pulled up historical records that made Tekvar's blood run cold. Human conflicts that had seen entire civilizations restructured, technological capabilities redirected for generations, and social systems rebuilt from the ground up. In our Second World War, one alliance mobilized over 100 million soldiers and produced over 4 million military vehicles from a single planet using primitive technology. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They completely rebuilt the global order to prevent such conflicts from recurring. Tekvar found himself leaning back involuntarily. You're threatening the entire Dominion? Not threatening, Sarah corrected. Warning. If you escalate this conflict, humans will respond by ensuring the Caltharan Dominion never threatens anyone again. Not by destroying your people, but by completely dismantling your military capacity and rebuilding your civilization as a peaceful research society. The communication channel fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't just talking about winning a battle or even a war. They were talking about fundamentally restructuring Caltharan society. That's impossible, Tekvar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Supreme Admiral, Sarah said gently, 3 hours ago, your finest admiral commanded the most powerful fleet in this sector. Where is that fleet now? Tekvar looked at his tactical displays, showing Vexnar's vessels peacefully orbiting Earth, their weapons converted to scientific instruments, their crews alive and unharmed but completely unable to continue military operations. Furthermore, Sarah added, our nanite swarms are already analyzing Caltharan technology. Within 6 months, we'll be able to produce vessels superior to your current designs. Within a year, we'll have technological parity with your entire civilization. She paused, letting the words sink in. And we'll be producing them at a rate your economy simply cannot match. Tekvar realized he was facing something unprecedented in Caltharan history. An enemy that couldn't be defeated. Through superior individual capability or advanced technology, the humans had weaponized their entire civilization and turned their apparent weaknesses into overwhelming strengths. What do you want? He asked finally. Sarah smiled. Peace, Admiral. We want to go back to exploring the galaxy, building colonies and conducting research. We never wanted a war with the Caltharan Dominion. And if we refuse, then we'll finish what you started, Sarah replied simply. And when it's over, there won't be a Caltharan Dominion anymore. There will be a peaceful research confederation that happens to be populated by former Caltharan citizens. Supreme Admiral Tekvar's response came 18 hours later, in the form of the largest military fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 57 battle fleets comprising over 3,000 ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The Caltharan Dominion had mobilized forces from across 17 sectors, stripping their border defenses to concentrate overwhelming power against humanity. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the rebuilt command center of Luna Station, watching the massive fleet take formation. Around her, her staff worked with the calm efficiency of people who had known this moment would come. Ma'am, reported Lieutenant Torres. Long-range sensors confirm the composition. They've brought everything. Battle carriers, siege platforms, planet crackers, and what appears to be their entire elite guard corps. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Any response to our final peace overture? Yes, ma'am. Torres pulled up the message. Quote, the Caltharan Dominion does not negotiate with primitives. Surrender immediately or face total annihilation. End quote. Dr. Williams looked up from her station. Sarah, they outnumber our current fleet by nearly 50 to 1. Even with our production capabilities, They have the raw firepower to overwhelm us. Sarah turned to face the main display showing the approaching alien armada. Doctor, you're thinking like them. You're focusing on the visible assets. She gestured to the tactical readout. What you're not seeing is what we've been building for the past 20 years. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of the entire Sol system. Scattered throughout the asteroid belt, hidden among the gas giant moons, and buried deep in planetary surfaces were thousands of installations that hadn't been there in previous scans. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah announced to her staff, I present the Sol Defense Grid, 2 decades of continuous construction using nanite technology and automated systems. The hidden installations came online simultaneously. Not weapons platforms as the Caltharans expected, but massive manufacturing and deployment centers. Each one immediately began producing and launching what could only be described as a mechanical storm. Millions of small craft poured from the installations, not ships in any traditional sense, but autonomous units designed for a single purpose, overwhelming any enemy through sheer numbers and perfect coordination. My God, whispered Torres. How many are there? Current deployment stands at approximately 12 million units, Sarah replied calmly, with production capacity of 2 million additional units per hour for as long as needed. But the mechanical swarm was only the beginning. From Earth itself, a new generation of human vessels began launching. These ships bore no resemblance to anything seen before, sleek, organic-looking craft that moved through space like living creatures. Ma'am, called the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Caltharan fleet. They're demanding to know what they're facing. Put them through. Supreme Admiral Thekvar appeared on screen, his forearms trembling with either rage or fear. Behind him, his command staff stared at sensor readings that defied belief. What have you done? He demanded. Sarah's expression remained perfectly calm. Supreme Admiral, we tried to warn you. Humans don't fight conventional wars when facing extinction. We fight total wars. On the display, the human swarm was approaching the Caltharan fleet, but instead of attacking, they were doing something far more sophisticated. The millions of autonomous units began linking together, forming larger and larger constructions that assembled themselves in real time. You see, Sarah continued, while you were traveling here, we've been preparing. Every asteroid miner, every construction drone, every manufacturing facility in the system has been repurposed for a single task, building the largest coordinated military force in galactic history. The linked units had formed massive structures around the Caltharan fleet, not attacking, but completely surrounding them. Within minutes, the entire alien armada found itself enclosed in a sphere of interconnected human constructs. Impossible, Thekvar breathed. No species can coordinate this level of simultaneous construction. Most can't, Sarah agreed. But humans developed something we call the Internet centuries ago. We've learned to link individual minds across vast distances, sharing information and coordinating actions in real time. Our current defense grid is controlled by over 2 billion human volunteers, each contributing processing power and tactical analysis. The implications were staggering. The Caltharans weren't facing a military force. They were facing an entire species working in perfect harmony. But that's still not the remarkable part, Sarah added. The remarkable part is what happens next. The sphere around the Caltharan fleet began to contract, but not to crush the ships inside. Instead, nanite streams poured from every surface, flowing over the alien vessels like liquid metal. But these weren't the same nanites from the previous engagement. Enhanced nanites version 2.0, Sarah explained as the alien ships began to change. These don't just disable weapon systems. They completely restructure matter at the molecular level. Thekvar watched in horror as his mighty warships were transformed into something else entirely. Weapons became medical equipment. Armor plating became research laboratories. Engine cores were converted into advanced manufacturing centers. You're not destroying our fleet, he realized. Destruction is wasteful, Sarah replied. We're converting it. Every ship in your armada is being transformed into a mobile research and assistance platform. Your crews will remain unharmed, but they'll be unable to engage in warfare ever again. This is insane, Thekvar roared. You cannot simply convert an entire civilization's military. Sarah's expression became deadly serious. Supreme Admiral, you declared war on humanity and threatened to glass our homeworld. Did you really think we would respond with half measures? The conversion process was accelerating. Across the Caltharon fleet, crews found their vessels becoming something completely alien to military thinking. Platforms designed for exploration, research, medical assistance, and peaceful construction. Furthermore, Sarah continued, our nanite swarms are already en route to every Caltharon military installation in the galaxy. We've analyzed your communication networks, mapped your supply lines, and identified every weapons manufacturing facility in your territory. Thekvar's face went pale. That's impossible. You couldn't have infiltrated our entire civilization. We didn't infiltrate it, Sarah corrected. We studied it. For 20 years, every piece of Caltharon technology that entered human space was analyzed and reverse-engineered. Every communication we intercepted was decoded. Every patrol route was mapped. She gestured to the display, which now showed a real-time map of Caltharon space. Red indicators marked thousands of military installations across 17 sectors. In approximately 6 hours, nanite swarms will simultaneously arrive at every major Caltharon military facility. They won't harm anyone, but they will ensure that the Caltharon Dominion never threatens another species again. The silence that followed was deafening. Thekvar and his command staff stared at the impossible scope of human preparation and coordination. How? Thekvar whispered. Sarah's smile returned, but it held no warmth. Admiral, when humans decide something is necessary for survival, we don't just mobilize our military. We mobilize our entire species. Every scientist, every engineer, every citizen becomes part of the effort. She paused, looking directly at the alien commander. You made the mistake of threatening our children's future. There is literally nothing humans won't do to protect that. 6 hours later, the reports began flooding in from across Caltharon space. Every military installation, every weapons factory, every strategic resource depot had been simultaneously infiltrated by human nanite swarms. In the most coordinated military operation in galactic history, humanity had effectively dismantled an entire interstellar empire's war machine without firing a single shot. Supreme Admiral, Thekvar sat in what had once been his command chair, aboard what had once been his flagship. The vessel now hummed with peaceful energy. Its former weapons bays converted into advanced research laboratories. Around him, his crew worked alongside human technicians who had arrived to help them understand their ship's new capabilities. I don't understand, he said to Commander Chen, who had joined him aboard the converted vessel. Why didn't you simply destroy us? Your capabilities clearly allow for complete annihilation of our forces. Sarah sat across from him, her posture relaxed but her eyes alert. That's the fundamental difference between humans and most military species, Admiral. We don't fight to destroy. We fight to solve problems. She gestured toward a viewport showing the vast fleet of converted Caltharon vessels now orbiting Earth peacefully. Your species saw humanity as a problem to be eliminated. We see the Caltharon Dominion as a brilliant civilization that made poor choices due to cultural conditioning. Thekvar's mandibles clicked in confusion. Cultural conditioning? Your entire society is built around the concept of military dominance, Sarah explained. For 3,000 years, your people have believed that strength comes from the ability to conquer others. But humans learned something different during our own development. Dr. Williams approached, carrying a tablet displaying historical records. Admiral, may I show you something? These are records from our own history, periods when humans believed as your people do now. The display showed images from Earth's bloodiest conflicts, ancient conquests, colonial expansions, world wars that had consumed entire continents. We were very much like your species once. Sarah continued. We believed in military supremacy, in taking what we wanted from those too weak to resist. We conquered. We enslaved. We destroyed entire civilizations because we could. Thekvar studied the images with growing recognition. These look like standard conquest patterns. Exactly, Sarah nodded. And do you know what we learned from all that conquest and domination? The Admiral shook his head. We learned that it doesn't work, Dr. Williams said simply. Every empire built on military force eventually collapses. Every civilization that relies on dominance over others eventually faces rebellion, resource depletion, or simple exhaustion. Sarah pulled up new images, the rebuilding of Europe after World War II, the international cooperation that had led to humanity's space program, the gradual transformation of human society from competitive nations to Collaborative planetary civilization. The strongest human. Societies weren't the ones that conquered the most territory, she explained. They were the ones that learned to cooperate most effectively. We discovered that coordinated effort produces exponentially better results than competitive dominance. Tekvar looked around at his converted ship, where former enemies worked together seamlessly. But how do you maintain order without military dominance? How do you prevent conflicts between different groups? By making cooperation more beneficial than conflict, Sarah replied. When everyone benefits from working together, very few people choose to fight. She activated a holographic display showing the current state of human space. Hundreds of worlds, thousands of research stations, millions of citizens all connected in a vast network of mutual support and shared knowledge. Look at what we've built through cooperation, Sarah said. In less than 2 centuries, we've spread across dozens of star systems, eliminated scarcity for basic needs, and achieved technological capabilities that rival your 3,000-year-old empire. But surely you must have military forces to maintain this, Tekvar protested. No civilization can exist without some form of enforcement. We do have enforcement, Sarah admitted, but it's based on protection and problem-solving rather than dominance and punishment. Every human citizen has access to education, resources, and opportunities. Crime exists, but it's rare because most conflicts can be resolved through mediation and resource reallocation. Dr. Williams added, the same principles apply to interstellar relations. We've encountered 17 other species during our expansion. 13 of them are now peaceful partners in our research consortium. 3 others maintain neutral trade relationships. Only your species chose immediate military confrontation. Tekvar considered this. And the ones who became partners, you didn't conquer them? Quite the opposite, Sarah smiled. We helped them solve their most pressing problems. Species facing resource shortages received manufacturing assistance. Civilizations struggling with disease received medical technology. Worlds threatened by natural disasters received evacuation and terraforming support. And they just cooperated with you? Admiral, Sarah said gently. When someone helps solve your problems rather than creating new ones, cooperation becomes the natural response. We've found that most species, given the choice between conflict and mutually beneficial partnership, choose partnership. The implications were staggering to someone raised in Caltharan military culture. But what about strength? What about honor in combat? What about the pride of conquest? Sarah's expression became serious. Admiral, we've learned that true strength isn't the ability to destroy others, it's the ability to build something better. Real honor isn't found in defeating enemies, it's found in turning enemies into allies. And the greatest pride doesn't come from conquest, it comes from creation. She gestured toward the converted fleet around them. Look what we've accomplished here. 24 hours ago, your fleet was an instrument of destruction capable of devastating entire worlds. Now it's a research and assistance fleet that could help solve problems across the galaxy. Tekvar followed her gaze, seeing his former warships transformed into platforms for peaceful purposes. But what if we refuse to accept this new role? What if we attempt to rebuild our military? Sarah's smile was sad but determined. Then we'll stop you just as we've done now. But Admiral, why would you want to? Your people are brilliant scientists, engineers, and explorers. Imagine what they could accomplish if that brilliance were directed toward creation instead of destruction. For the first time in his life, Tekvar found himself considering the possibility that military dominance might not be the highest form of civilization. Around him, he could see his own crew members engaged in fascinating conversations with human researchers, their natural curiosity awakening as they explored their ship's new capabilities. This is why you were so confident, he realized. You weren't just prepared to defeat us militarily. You were prepared to offer us something better than what we had. Exactly, Sarah nodded. We've learned that the most effective way to end conflicts isn't to destroy your enemies. It's to make them no longer want to be your enemies. She stood, preparing to leave. Admiral, your people have a choice to make. You can spend the next few decades trying to rebuild your military and return to the old ways of dominance and conquest, or you can join us in building something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly cooperative interstellar civilization. As she reached the door, Tekvar called out, "And if we choose cooperation?" Sarah turned back with a genuine smile. "Then we'll help you solve problems you didn't even know could be solved." And 1,000 years from now, when other species look back at this moment, they'll see it as the beginning of a golden age of cooperation, rather than the end of Caltharan independence. 3 months after the end of what historians would later call the Conversion War, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly renamed research vessel Harmony of Calthera, formerly Supreme Admiral Thekvar's flagship. Through the viewport, she watched a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. Caltharan and human engineers worked side by side in zero gravity, constructing a massive orbital platform around a star system that had been ravaged by ancient wars. The joint project would become the galaxy's first interspecies research institute, dedicated to solving the kinds of problems that affected entire civilizations. "Commander," came a familiar voice behind her. Admiral Thekvar approached, but he looked nothing like the fierce military leader who had threatened Earth's destruction. His ornate battle armor had been replaced with the practical work gear of a research director, and his forearms carried data tablets instead of weapons. Sorry. Director Thekvar, Sarah corrected with a smile. "How are the integration protocols progressing?" Thekvar's mandibles clicked, and what Sarah had learned was the Caltharan equivalent of a chuckle. "Better than I would have believed possible. My people are adapting to their new roles with remarkable enthusiasm. It seems that when you remove the pressure of maintaining military dominance, natural scientific curiosity flourishes." Gestured toward the viewport where a team of Caltharan scientists were using their superior physical strength to help human engineers position massive structural components. "We're discovering that our species complement each other remarkably well. Caltharan physical capabilities combined with human coordination and adaptability create possibilities neither of us could achieve alone." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "That's exactly what we hoped would happen. Diversity of capabilities leads to creative solutions. I must admit," Thekvar continued, "when you first spoke of cooperation, I thought it was weakness disguised as philosophy. I understand now that it was actually a more sophisticated form of strength." Through their communication implants, both leaders received an update from the construction teams. The orbital platform was ahead of schedule and under budget, with safety records that exceeded anything either species had achieved independently. "Director," Sarah said, "I've received word from the Galactic Council. 6 more species have formally requested inclusion in our cooperative framework. Apparently, news of our success has spread faster than we anticipated." Thekvar's eyes brightened with genuine excitement. "Which species?" "The Zephyrian Collective is interested in our ecological restoration projects. The crystalline communes want to share their energy manipulation technologies. The deep swimmers are offering their expertise in planetary oceanography." Sarah paused, checking her notes. "And surprisingly, the warrior courts of Mandalore have inquired about converting their combat training systems into disaster response protocols." "The warrior courts?" Thekvar was amazed. "They're even more militaristic than we were. What changed their minds?" Sarah smiled. "Apparently they've been watching our conversion process. When they saw that former Caltharan warriors were finding honor and purpose in protecting and building, rather than conquering and destroying, they became interested in exploring similar transformations. The implications were staggering. If the most militaristic cultures in the galaxy were voluntarily choosing cooperation over conquest, it suggested a fundamental shift in how intelligent species approached interstellar relations. "There's something else," Sarah added. "We've received a formal request from the Caltharan Home System. They want to convert their remaining military academies into research, universities and their weapons, manufacturing facilities into terraforming equipment production centers." Thekvar was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what his people had chosen. A complete transformation of our entire civilization. From a military dominion to what would you call it? "A constructive civilization," Sarah suggested. "A society dedicated to building, healing, and solving problems rather than creating them." As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Williams approached with a data tablet displaying the latest reports from across former Caltharan space. "Director, Commander," she greeted them. "I thought you'd want to see these preliminary results from the social transition." The tablet showed statistics that painted a remarkable picture. Crime rates had dropped by 70% across Caltharan worlds, as resources were redirected from military purposes to education and infrastructure. Scientific output had increased by 400% as brilliant minds previously focused on weapons development turned their attention to beneficial technologies. Most remarkably, Dr. Williams continued, psychological health indices show massive improvements. It appears that when people can dedicate their lives to constructive purposes rather than destructive ones, overall well-being improves dramatically. Tekvar studied the data with the analytical mind that had once made him a formidable military strategist. These numbers suggest that our entire understanding of civilization was fundamentally flawed. We measured success by our ability to dominate others, but cooperation produces objectively better outcomes for everyone involved. It's not just better outcomes, Sarah observed. It's sustainable outcomes. Military dominance requires constant expansion and increasing resource consumption, but cooperative problem-solving becomes more efficient and effective over time as knowledge and capabilities accumulate. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The holographic display activated, showing representatives from the 6 species requesting inclusion in their cooperative framework. But there were also representatives from 12 other civilizations who had been observing the transformation. "Greetings," came a synthesized voice from the crystalline communes. "We have witnessed the transformation of the Caltharan Dominion and the prosperity of human space. Our combined councils have voted unanimously to request formal inclusion in your cooperative civilization." Similar statements came from each of the other species. What had begun as humanity's response to a single military threat was becoming a galaxy-wide movement toward cooperative civilization. After the transmission ended, Sarah and Tekvar stood in contemplative silence, watching the construction teams continue their work on the research platform. "Commander," Tekvar said finally, "I must ask, did you anticipate this outcome when you first confronted my fleet?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Not the specific details, but yes, we hoped for something like this. You see, humans learned long ago that the most decisive victories aren't won on battlefields. They're won in the choices people make about what kind of civilization they want to build." She gestured toward the bustling construction site, where dozens of species now work together. "When you threatened to destroy Earth, you gave us the opportunity to demonstrate that there was a better way to resolve conflicts. We showed not just you, but every species watching, that cooperation produces better results than conquest. And now the galaxy is choosing cooperation over conflict," Tekvar mused. "Not because they were forced to, but because they saw the evidence of what was possible." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "The most powerful weapon humans ever developed wasn't a tool of destruction. It was proof that constructive civilization works better than destructive civilization." As they watched, the research platform's main structure locked into place, its completion marked by celebrations from work teams representing 17 different species. The future was being built not through conquest or dominance, but through the simple recognition that intelligent beings accomplish more when they work together than when they work against each other. In the end, Sarah reflected, humanity had kept its promise. When faced with superior force threatening their survival, they had indeed brought extra stretchers. But not for the wounded soldiers of a military victory, for the growing number of species choosing to join them in building something better than any of them could achieve alone. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in millennia, that was a cause for hope rather than fear.